I still remember the moment she told me, tears streaming down her face, hands trembling as she held up the pregnancy test. "It's positive," she whispered. "We're finally going to be parents." After 3 years of trying, of negative tests and dashed hopes, it felt like our miracle had finally arrived. I held her so tight that night, dreaming of the family we were about to become. But miracles rarely happen in real life. That's the first lesson I learned. The second lesson, trust your instincts. Because something felt wrong from the beginning. The way she suddenly guarded her phone, the mysterious doctor's appointments that never quite lined up, the late-night texts she'd hide when I entered the room. Small things easily explained away, but they piled up like snowflakes until I was buried in doubt. Then I saw him, the just a friend from her office, David. They didn't notice me across the restaurant as he placed his hand over hers, as she leaned in close, laughing in a way she hadn't with me in months. The pieces started falling into place, forming a picture I didn't want to see. Most men would have confronted her right then, demanded answers, thrown accusations, but something stopped me. A voice that said, "Watch and wait." So that's exactly what I did. For the next 6 months, I became the perfect expectant father on the surface, attending appointments, building the nursery, posting excited updates on social media. But behind that facade, I was documenting everything. Every meeting they had, every hotel they visited, every sonogram appointment where he sat in the waiting room while I was conveniently scheduled to work. I recorded it all, building a case while she built a lie. The truth was devastating. The baby wasn't mine. She and David had been planning this for months, her getting pregnant with his child, while convincing me it was mine. They even falsified a paternity test, which I discovered hidden in her email drafts. All while planning their future together once the baby arrived and they could finally come clean about their relationship. What they didn't plan for was me, silently watching, meticulously gathering evidence, waiting for the perfect moment. That moment is tomorrow, David's wedding day. Not to my wife, ironically. He apparently found someone better just before the baby was born, leaving her alone with their child and the shattered remains of the future they'd planned. Now I'm sitting here with a flash drive containing every piece of evidence, every recording, every lie. Tomorrow his bride will know exactly who she's marrying, because while my wife said the baby was mine, he didn't know I was watching the whole time. I was never supposed to be a father. That's what the doctors told us 3 years ago, after countless tests and specialists. My sperm count was too low, motility issues they called it, a less than 5% chance of natural conception. I remember holding Melissa's hand in that sterile office, watching her try to stay strong as our dreams of a family crumbled around us. We explored options, IVF, donor sperm, adoption. But the costs were astronomical, the waiting lists endless. Eventually, we settled into a new normal, focused on our careers, our marriage, tried to find fulfillment without children. It wasn't the life we'd imagined, but we were making it work, or so I thought. That Tuesday evening last May changed everything. I came home early from a business trip, wanting to surprise Melissa. Instead, I was the one surprised, finding her in the bathroom staring at a pregnancy test with an expression I couldn't quite read. "James," she gasped when she saw me, You're home early." I nodded toward the test in her hand. "Is that what I think it is?" For a moment, she seemed frozen, like she was calculating something in her head. Then her face transformed, joy, tears, disbelief. "It's positive," she said, her voice breaking. "I don't know how, but we're going to have a baby." I crossed the bathroom in 2 strides, swept her into my arms. A miracle, our miracle. Against all odds, we had beaten the 5% chance. I felt elated, terrified, overwhelmed, all the emotions I'd imagined feeling when this moment finally came. "How long have you known?" I asked, still holding her close. "I just took the test," she said quickly. "I've been feeling off for a few days, but I never thought, after what the doctors said." I kissed her forehead. Sometimes medicine gets it wrong. Sometimes miracles happen. She smiled up at me, but there was something in her eyes, a flicker of something I couldn't identify. Yes, she agreed, miracles happen. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. We confirmed the pregnancy with a doctor, started planning the nursery, told our families. Everyone called it our miracle baby. My parents cried. Her parents sent champagne, non-alcoholic for Melissa, of course. Our friends threw an early celebration dinner. Through it all, Melissa seemed happy, excited, but sometimes distant, like part of her was somewhere else. I chalked it up to hormones, to the physical and emotional toll of early pregnancy. When she started keeping her phone closer, I told myself she was just researching baby stuff, joining pregnancy forums. When she began taking private calls, stepping outside or into another room, I assumed it was work-related stress she didn't want to burden me with. But then the appointments started. Extra checkups she'd schedule when I was at work. Consultations with specialists she'd conveniently forget to mention until after they happened. Nothing to worry about, she'd assure me, just being extra cautious. I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted so badly to just enjoy this unexpected blessing. But little things kept nagging at me. The way she'd close her laptop when I entered the room. The text notifications she'd quickly dismiss without letting me see. The late nights at the office that had never been part of her routine before. 6 weeks after the positive test, I found myself parked outside her office building at 7 p.m., the time she'd said she'd be leaving. I told myself I was just being a good husband, surprising her with dinner after a long day. But deep down, I knew I was there to confirm or deny the suspicion growing like a cancer in my mind. At 7:15, I watched her walk out of the building with a tall, dark-haired man I recognized from her company Christmas party. David Mercer, her department's new creative director. They weren't touching, weren't doing anything inappropriate, just walking and talking. Still, something about their body language made my stomach clench. I followed them at a distance as they walked to a nearby restaurant. Not a romantic spot, just a casual bistro. They sat outside on the patio, giving me a clear view from my parked position across the street. For an hour, I watched them talk, laugh, lean in close. Nothing overtly suspicious, nothing I could point to and say, aha, just two colleagues having dinner, until the check came. David reached across the table and took her hand, squeezing it gently, and Melissa, my wife, my pregnant wife, looked at him with such naked longing that I felt physically ill. I drove home in a daze, arrived before her, and pretended to be working in my home office when she finally returned at 9:30. "Sorry I'm late," she called up the stairs. "Team dinner ran long. You know how Ryan gets when he starts talking about quarterly projections." Ryan, not David, the first direct lie. I came downstairs, kissed her cheek. "How was it?" "Boring," she said, avoiding my eyes. "But the pasta was good." That night while she slept, I checked her phone for the first time in our 8-year relationship. It was locked. Another new development. She'd never had a passcode before, but I knew her well enough to try her birth year plus the last 2 digits of her employee ID. It worked. What I found wasn't the smoking gun I'd half expected, half dreaded. No explicit text exchanges, no love notes. But there were dozens of calls and texts to and from DM over the past several months, far more than would be normal for a purely professional relationship. Most texts were innocuous on the surface, work questions, schedule coordination. But reading between the lines, I could sense the hidden meanings, the carefully worded messages designed to look innocent to anyone else. The timestamp on the first message from David was 9 months ago, 3 months before the positive pregnancy test, right around when he joined the company. I put her phone back exactly as I'd found it, then lay awake until dawn, staring at the ceiling, feeling my world slowly cracking apart. By morning I had made a decision. I wouldn't confront her, not yet. I would watch. I would wait. I would find out exactly what was happening before I made my next move. Because if what I suspected was true, If this miracle baby wasn't mine at all, I needed to be absolutely certain before I shattered what remained of our life together. The art of surveillance is patience. I learned this quickly as I began my secret investigation into my wife's life. It's amazing what you can discover when people think you aren't paying attention. I started simple, a GPS tracker on her car synced to my phone. Not strictly legal, perhaps, but neither was lying to your husband about whose child you were carrying. Next came the home security system upgrade. Cameras with audio in common areas of our house, ostensibly for safety during the pregnancy. Melissa didn't question it. She'd been pushing for better security herself since we'd found out about the baby. I created a new email account, set up cloud storage for evidence, and began documenting everything. Dates, times, inconsistencies in her stories. I feigned extra hours at work while actually sitting in parking lots, watching her meet David at cafes, parks, medical buildings. I recorded their conversations when possible, photographed their meetings from a distance. What emerged was both heartbreaking and infuriating. They had been having an affair for months before the pregnancy. Based on their conversations, which I occasionally captured with a directional microphone from my car, they had planned the pregnancy, deliberately, calculating her fertile days, timing their encounters, all while I believed we were dealing with my infertility. The doctor says everything looks perfect, I overheard Melissa telling him outside a prenatal clinic one afternoon. 10 weeks along now. James is so excited, it's almost painful to watch. David had laughed. Just a few more months of this charade, then we can figure out the next steps. You're sure the timing is right? He won't suspect? He has no reason to, she replied. The fertility doctors told him his chances were practically zero. He thinks it's a miracle. Their callousness stunned me. This wasn't just an affair, not just a moment of weakness. This was calculated deception on a level I couldn't comprehend. They were planning to use me. For how long, I wasn't sure. Until the baby was born? Until it was a toddler? When exactly were these next steps supposed to happen? As my evidence mounted, I maintained my facade as the excited, expectant father. I attended the 20-week anatomy scan, held Melissa's hand as we learned we were having a girl. I built the crib, painted the nursery a soft sage green, installed the car seat. On social media, we were the perfect expecting couple, my hand on her growing belly, both of us smiling broadly at the camera. Behind that smile, I was dying inside. The worst day came when Melissa announced she'd scheduled a non-invasive prenatal paternity test. Just for peace of mind, since the doctors were so sure you couldn't conceive naturally. Her thoughtfulness, her concern for my feelings, it was all an act. I knew because I'd already discovered her private email account where she and David had discussed falsifying the results. I watched her receive the real test results online, confirming what I already knew, that David was the father, and then doctor a fake report showing my paternity instead. The technical skill involved was impressive. The moral bankruptcy it represented was devastating. When she proudly presented me with the falsified results, I had to excuse myself to the bathroom, where I vomited until there was nothing left but bile. Then I splashed water on my face, fixed my expression into one of joy and relief, and went back out to hug my wife, to thank her for her thoughtfulness, to celebrate our miracle. That night, I added the real paternity results and her forged version to my growing file of evidence. As her due date approached, I noticed a shift in David's behavior. Their meetings became less frequent, his responses to her texts slower. Through snippets of conversations and their email exchanges. Yes, I had gained access to that too. Never underestimate the power of a keylogger installed during a loving computer cleanup for your pregnant wife. I discovered the source of the change. David had met someone else. Someone without the complication of a husband and an imminent baby. We need to talk about our timeline, I overheard him tell Melissa during what would be their last meeting, at a coffee shop near her office. Things are evolving for me. I think we need to adjust our expectations. I didn't catch her response, but her body language told me everything. the stiffening of her shoulders, the white-knuckled grip on her cup, the slight shake of her head. That evening, she came home, especially affectionate, especially attentive, made my favorite dinner, suggested we finalize our list of baby names. Looking back, I realized she was panicking. Her carefully constructed plan was falling apart, and she was desperately trying to secure her backup option, me. 2 weeks before her due date, I discovered David was engaged. He'd proposed to his new girlfriend, a pharmaceutical rep named Caroline, after just 3 months of dating. Their wedding was set for 6 months after Melissa's due date. The announcement appeared on social media, flooding Melissa's carefully curated feeds with congratulatory messages from mutual colleagues. That night, for the first time, I heard my wife cry herself to sleep. Not the occasional sniffles of pregnancy hormones, but deep, wrenching sobs she tried to muffle with her pillow. I lay beside her, eyes open in the darkness, feeling nothing but a cold, clear certainty about what I needed to do. Our daughter, no, their daughter, was born on a Tuesday morning after 14 hours of labor. I stood by Melissa's side through every contraction, every push. I cut the cord. I counted 10 perfect fingers and 10 perfect toes. I held this innocent child against my chest and felt a confusing rush of love and grief. In the hospital room, surrounded by flowers and balloons, Melissa gazed up at me with exhausted eyes. "She has your nose," she lied, as the baby, who looked exactly like David, slept peacefully in her bassinet. I smiled and agreed, adding one more performance to my months-long charade, one more piece of evidence to my now substantial collection, one more day closer to the reckoning that was coming. Because while Melissa thought she had successfully pulled off her deception, she had no idea I'd been watching the whole time. No idea that I knew exactly whose baby this was. No idea of what I was planning to do with that knowledge. Living a double life takes its toll. For the first 3 months after Sophia's birth, I existed in 2 realities simultaneously. The devoted new father and husband on the surface, the betrayed man meticulously building his case underneath. Each day was an exercise in compartmentalization, in maintaining the walls between what I knew and what I showed. Melissa had withdrawn somewhat after the birth, likely depressed about David's engagement and sudden absence from her life. She went through the motions of motherhood competently, but without the radiant joy I'd always imagined she'd have. Sometimes I'd catch her staring at Sophia with an odd expression, not quite regret, not quite love, something complicated in between. Meanwhile, David had all but disappeared from her life. No more meetings, no more texts. According to my surveillance, she'd tried to contact him several times after Sophia's birth, but he'd been increasingly distant, eventually stopping responses altogether. He was focused on his upcoming wedding, on his shiny new life with Caroline, conveniently unburdened by the child he'd helped create. The irony wasn't lost on me. Melissa had played me for a fool, convinced me to raise another man's child, only to be abandoned by that very man. If I were a different person, I might have found some satisfaction in her predicament. Instead, I mostly felt tired. Tired of the lies, tired of pretending, tired of the weight of knowledge I carried alone. 4 months after Sophia's birth, Melissa received a wedding invitation in the mail. David and Caroline requesting the pleasure of her company at their ceremony in May. She stood in our kitchen, staring at the cream-colored card, her face drained of color. "An old work friend," she explained, when she noticed me watching. "From before the baby?" I nodded. "You should go. It would be good for you to get out, see people." She seemed startled by my encouragement. "You wouldn't mind, with Sophia?" "I can handle our daughter for a day," I said, careful to keep my tone light. "You deserve some adult time." The flash of guilt across her face was almost imperceptible, but I'd become adept at reading her micro-expressions. She tucked the invitation away and didn't mention it again, but I knew she'd RSVP'd yes from the email notification I'd intercepted days later. As the wedding date approached, I finalized my own plans. I organized my evidence meticulously, Photos, videos, email exchanges, the real paternity test results alongside Melissa's forged version. I added a detailed timeline of their affair, their plotting, their eventual falling out. I created multiple copies on separate encrypted drives, and I prepared a letter to accompany it all, addressed to Caroline. I wasn't doing this out of pure vengeance, though I can't deny there was some satisfaction in the thought of exposing their deception. But Caroline deserved to know who she was marrying. A man capable of fathering a child and walking away, of participating in an elaborate scheme to deceive another man into raising that child. If she chose to marry him anyway, at least it would be with full knowledge of his character. 2 weeks before the wedding, I found Melissa in our home office, staring at her laptop with tears streaming down her face. I quietly approached, glancing at her screen. She was looking at David and Caroline's wedding website, scrolling through their engagement photos, their sickeningly sweet how we met story that conveniently began after he'd already impregnated my wife. "Are you okay?" I asked, placing a hand on her shoulder. She quickly wiped her tears, closed the laptop. "Just hormones," she lied. "Still getting back to normal after the baby." I handed her a tissue. "If you ever want to talk, I'm here." She looked up at me with such naked gratitude that for a moment I almost wavered, almost felt sorry for her, almost considered letting the whole thing go, continuing our life together, raising Sophia as my own, never revealing what I knew. But then I remembered the months of deliberate deception, the calculated way she'd used my infertility diagnosis against me, the falsified paternity test, the countless lies she'd told while looking me straight in the eyes, and I knew I couldn't live with that knowledge forever, couldn't build a life on such a rotten foundation. The morning of the wedding arrived. Melissa had chosen a blue dress, had her hair done the day before. She seemed nervous, fidgety, checking her phone constantly. "What time does it start?" I asked casually, bouncing Sophia on my knee. 4, she replied, not meeting my eyes. "I should be home by 10 at the latest. There's pumped milk in the fridge, and you have my cell if anything comes up." I smiled reassuringly. "We'll be fine, won't we, Sophia?" I cooed at the baby, who gurgled in response. "You enjoy yourself, don't worry about us." As she left, I felt a strange calm settle over me. Today was the day everything would change. Today, the lies would end. I waited until I knew she would have arrived at the venue, then sent a text to the number I'd acquired for Caroline. "There's a package for you at the front desk. Important information before you say, 'I do.'" I had arranged for a courier to deliver my carefully prepared flash drive and letter to the hotel where the ceremony was being held. Timed it so that Caroline would receive it as she was getting ready, with enough time to review the contents before the ceremony began. Then I waited, playing with Sophia, giving her a bath, going through the motions of our evening routine while my phone remained ominously silent beside me. The call came at 5:38 p.m. Melissa, her voice tight with barely controlled hysteria. "The wedding's off," she said without preamble. "Someone sent Caroline proof that David and that Sophia is—" She couldn't finish the sentence. "Melissa," I said calmly, "I think we need to talk when you get home." A long pause. "It was you," she whispered. "You've known. All this time you've known." "I'll see you soon," I replied, then ended the call. I put Sophia down for her evening nap, then sat in the living room waiting. This house, which had once represented our future together, now felt like a stage set where we'd both been playing parts in different plays. Soon the performance would end. The truth would finally be spoken aloud. When I heard her key in the lock, I took a deep breath and prepared for the final act. Melissa stood in the doorway, mascara streaked down her face, her blue dress wrinkled and askew. She looked simultaneously devastated and furious as she clutched her phone in a white-knuckled grip. "How long have you known?" she demanded, not bothering to close the door behind her. I rose from the couch, my calm in stark contrast to her agitation. "Close the door, Melissa. Sophia is sleeping." The mention of the baby seemed to momentarily deflate her. She shut the door quietly, then turned back to me, waiting for an answer. "I've known since before she was born," I said finally. "I suspected even earlier. The restaurant where you met David when you claimed to be with Ryan. The prenatal appointments you didn't think I knew about. The falsified paternity test." She flinched at each item on my list. "You've been spying on me." "Yes," I admitted without hesitation. "After I discovered you were lying to me about something as fundamental as whose child I was raising, I felt justified in finding out the truth." "So you what? Followed me, hacked my emails, recorded my conversations?" Her voice rose with each question. "That's illegal." "Probably," I agreed. "So is paternity fraud. So is falsifying medical documents. We've both crossed lines, Melissa. The difference is that I did it to uncover the truth, while you did it to perpetuate a lie." She sank onto the edge of the couch, her anger giving way to something that looked almost like relief. "So now what? You've blown up David's wedding, exposed everything? Are you having me arrested, filing for divorce? What's your endgame here, James?" I sat in the armchair opposite her, maintaining the physical distance between us. I needed Caroline to know who she was marrying. She deserved that much. "How magnanimous," Melissa said bitterly. "You've ruined 3 lives to protect a woman you've never even met." 4 lives, I corrected. "You're forgetting Sophia." At the mention of her daughter, Melissa's face crumpled. "What happens to her now? Are you going to take her from me too?" The question hung in the air between us. It was one I'd wrestled with for months. Despite everything, despite knowing Sophia wasn't biologically mine, I had bonded with her. I'd been there for every midnight feeding, every smile, every tiny milestone of her short life. Biology aside, I felt like her father. But I also knew I couldn't continue living this lie, couldn't raise her within the poisonous environment of deception her mother had created. "Sophia deserves better than what either of us has given her so far," I said finally. "She deserves the truth, when she's old enough to understand it. And until then, she deserves parents who aren't living a lie." Melissa stared at me, tears streaming down her face. "I never meant to hurt you," she whispered. "It just happened. David and I connected, and then when I got pregnant, I panicked. I knew how much you wanted a baby, how devastated you were by the infertility diagnosis. I thought I was giving you what you wanted. By lying to me, by making me believe I was raising my own child when you knew I wasn't." I shook my head, disgusted. "That wasn't your decision to make, Melissa. You stole my agency, my right to choose my own path. You used my pain against me." "I know," she said, her voice small. "I know that now. But I was scared, and David was pushing for a solution, and it seemed like everyone would get what they wanted. Except David decided he didn't want it after all," I pointed out. "He found someone better and left you holding the bag, left you to maintain the lie alone." She nodded, fresh tears spilling. "He changed his mind about everything once he met Caroline. Said a baby would complicate things for them. Said we should stick with the original plan, you raising Sophia as yours." The callousness of it, both of them, still had the power to shock me. And what was supposed to happen long-term in this scenario? Were you planning to stay married to me forever, living this lie? Or was there an exit strategy once Sophia was older? What? Melissa couldn't meet my eyes. David thought, once she was in school, maybe I could ask for a divorce, get primary custody, eventually introduce him as a new father figure. I let out a disbelieving laugh. "You two really thought this through, didn't you? Mapped out my entire life without my knowledge or consent. It was never supposed to go this far," she insisted. "But then he met Caroline, and everything changed, and I realized I'd made a terrible mistake. I just didn't know how to fix it without losing everything. You, Sophia, my reputation." I studied her face, searching for genuine remorse versus regret at being caught. It was impossible to tell anymore. I'd lost my ability to trust her, to read her, to believe anything she said. "I want a divorce," I said finally. I'll be filing first thing Monday morning. She nodded, seeming resigned to this outcome. And Sophia? I'll be seeking joint custody, I replied. Despite everything, I've been her father for the past 7 months. I'm the only father she knows. I won't abandon her just because of your and David's actions. Surprise flickered across Melissa's face. You still want to be in her life? Even knowing... Sophia is innocent in all this, I said firmly. She didn't ask to be born into this situation. She didn't choose her biological father or the circumstances of her conception. I won't punish her for the choices you and David made. For the first time that evening, Melissa looked genuinely moved. Thank you, she whispered. She loves you. Even at this age, I can tell. Her face lights up when you come into the room. I nodded, refusing to be swayed by this observation. True as it might be. I've already spoken to a lawyer. There will be conditions. Sophia will know the truth when she's old enough, not some sanitized version you create to protect yourself. David will need to take a legal paternity test and accept financial responsibility. And you will never, ever lie to me about anything related to her again. And David? She asked tentatively. What happens with him now? I shrugged. That's between you two and possibly the courts. I've done what I needed to do, expose the truth. What happens next is up to him, to Caroline, to you. As if summoned by our conversation, Melissa's phone buzzed with an incoming call. David's name flashed on the screen. She stared at it, then back at me, uncertainty written across her face. You should take that, I said, standing up. I'm going to check on Sophia. We can finish this conversation later. As I climbed the stairs toward the nursery, I could hear Melissa's hushed, tearful voice behind me. I didn't need to listen to know what was being said. David would be furious. Caroline had presumably called off the wedding. His carefully constructed new life had imploded, just as mine had months earlier when I'd first discovered their deception. In Sophia's room, I stood over her crib, watching her peaceful sleep, her tiny chest rising and falling, her perfect fingers curled into fists beside her head. In that moment, despite everything, I knew I'd made the right decision, not just in exposing the truth, but in choosing to remain in her life. Because while biology makes you a father, it's presence that makes you a dad. It's midnight feedings and first smiles, and tiny fingers wrapped around yours. It's showing up day after day, even when it's hard, even when the circumstances are far from what you ever imagined. I'll always be here for you, I whispered to her sleeping form, no matter what happens next. Downstairs, I could hear Melissa still on the phone, her voice rising with emotion. Soon we would have to negotiate the complicated path forward. Divorce proceedings, custody arrangements, the legal establishment of David's paternity. It would be messy, painful, public. The carefully constructed fantasy Melissa had created would be permanently shattered. But as I stood in that quiet nursery, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Peace. The burden of carrying the secret, of living the lie, had finally been lifted. The truth was out. And while it hadn't set anyone free, exactly, it had cleared the path forward. 6 months later, our divorce was finalized. David, under threat of legal action, had taken a court-ordered paternity test confirming what we already knew. He and Caroline had eventually reconciled and married in a much smaller ceremony, though I heard through mutual connections that her family remained wary of him. He paid child support, but showed little interest in being part of Sophia's life. A fact that wounded Melissa deeply, but didn't surprise me. As for me, I moved into a small house 10 minutes from what had been our family home. Sophia had her own room there, decorated with stars and moons. On my custody days, I'd take her to the park, read her stories, build the foundation of a relationship that would withstand the complicated truth she would eventually learn. Sometimes, watching her play, I'd catch glimpses of David in her features, the shape of her eyes, the curve of her smile. But increasingly, I saw reflections of myself too, not in her biology, but in her expressions, her habits, the person she was becoming under my care. Melissa and I maintained a civil, if distant, co-parenting relationship. The anger and betrayal hadn't disappeared, but they had dulled with time and the shared focus on Sophia's well-being. We would never be friends, never fully trust each other again, but we had found a way to function as Sophia's parents, despite the wreckage of our former life. People sometimes ask if I regret my decision, not just to expose the truth, but to remain in Sophia's life afterward. They wonder if it wouldn't have been easier to make a clean break, to start fresh without the constant reminder of Melissa's betrayal. Perhaps it would have been easier, but being a parent isn't about choosing the easy path. It's about choosing the right one. And despite the unorthodox beginning to our relationship, I know with absolute certainty that being Sophia's dad is exactly where I'm meant to be. She may not have my DNA, but she has my heart. And in the end, that's what truly makes a family. Not the secrets we keep, but the truths we choose to embrace, even when they're difficult, even when they're not what we expected, even when they come to us in the most unexpected ways. Because while Melissa said the baby was mine, what neither she nor David knew was that I was watching the whole time. And in watching, in choosing to remain present despite the lies, I became something neither biology nor deception could dictate. I became a father on my own terms, with eyes wide open to both the pain and the beauty of this unexpected path.